It's an honor for me to be here to share a reflection on the life and the blessing of our friend Bill Mahedy. A life full of purpose and service and, yes, joy. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?" And I said, "Here I am, Lord. Send me." There are no words to adequately encompass the good of Uncle Bill, as we called Father Mahedy, but somehow that passage resonates. It certainly resonates with us veterans. A couple of weeks ago, on the 16th of July, Michael called from the hospital where he was with his papa and asked if I would show he and his family around Stand Down, which was going on at the time. I said, certainly, I'd be delighted. And I met Michael and Olivia, Devin and Nick, and we were on the passage over Interstate 5. It's an elevated posture as you walk down towards Stand Down in the tent city. The power and the beauty of a community healing. And that's just one evidence of the good of Bill Mahedy. I told the kids that day, it was sort of like when you throw a rock in a very still pond. There's the initial splash, the launch, and then there's the ripples. And those ripples go on and on, ever on, to this day. Look at the good your grandpa has done, is what I said to those kids. And when you look at Stand Down with its 1,003 veterans, 3,500 citizen volunteers, those are just part of a ring of energy that came out of this being. Bill joined the Army as a chaplain and rode with the 1st Air Cavalry Division in Vietnam. He ate plenty of dirt, saw his share of the jungle, and it took its toll. He ministered at the junction, at the crossroads of life and death, for kids that had no real idea of the great philosophic arguments, discourses. They were simply trying to survive, to get home. Thank God for this man in their midst. After the war, Bill worked in Los Angeles with the VA, and that's where he met our friend John Baca. And he developed right then, and it lasted his entire lifetime, his method of counseling with combat veterans. And that method was direct fire, eyeball to eyeball, the most labor-intensive and difficult type, but the type that actually worked. He also met Shad Meshad at that time. And together, they recognized that there was a real need for the Vietnam-era veterans that the VA was not meeting. This is not today's VA. Today's VA is a whole different kettle of fish. But at that time, we sort of resented the VA and had real bad feelings about it. Shad and Bill understood that, and they co-authored the Vet Center program, which was an attempt to bring it, not an attempt, it brought the VA to the combat veterans, brought the services down far more approachable and responsive. It was a wonderful gift for us. And what a team they were. That was a stroke of genius. Today, there are over 300 vet centers across this country, annually serving in excess of 200,000 veterans. You talk about a ripple. Bill and Carol came home to San Diego in 1979. And he began to develop plans for our vet center down here. I met Bill on December 7th, 1979, at a bigwig meeting that somehow I stumbled into. And about a month later, he called me and he asked if I would help him with a Vietnam veteran who was in trouble. I said, sure. He gave me a place and time. I went and found a small group of about a dozen guys to whom he had apparently posed exactly the same question. So we sat in that circle looking out to figure out who needed the help. And lo and behold, we came to realize after some effort that it was for each of us. That was the first rap group of the Vet Center of San Diego. The vet center is still in service in San Diego. It's a wonderful place. We met every Tuesday evening. We got together, and that was like a life preserver for me and for the other guys in that group. And one thing about Uncle Bill is he was not afraid of the wild, so to speak. He had no fear. He had a great sense of humor. And for example, in his desk, the lower left-hand drawer of that desk was for guys to be able to leave their weapons when they were in therapy in the group. And that actually went on. So his equanimity, his sense of fun and good humor permeated even the most troubled of us. Really, he relit the flicker of trust in us. What a gift. As the group went on, we started to address the issues that were important to us. We started a meeting there. Randy Way, my friend, triple threat is for combat veterans with drug and alcohol problems, and Bill allowed us to meet in the vet center Wednesdays. And so every Wednesday night since that time, in early 1980, there's been a meeting of triple threat in San Diego. It goes on to this day at the Vietnam Veterans of San Diego, Veterans Village of San Diego, it's now called, down on Pacific Coast Highway. We had ideations to act out, to bomb the VA, to do, you know, those normal boy type things. And Billy had the sense, in a very positive and constructive way, to help us do good, so to speak. And so in March of 1981, we founded the Vietnam Veterans of San Diego. And we were focused. The beauty of his guidance was he was able to help us focus, or to, in our language, rifle. This was not a shotgun approach. This wasn't theoretical. This was nuts and bolts. This was things we needed. And what we needed were jobs, recovery for certain, and housing. The extraordinary success of VVSD was in large part due to the spacious and non-judgmental way that Bill guided us. He understood that we needed boundaries and safety, but his trust in us and his love for us allowed us to never really feel the fences that together we constructed. We felt empowered, and we did some amazing things. VVSD ran the single largest jobs program for combat veterans in 1983. We found 1,582 good-paying jobs for combat veterans with then Mayor Pete Wilson. In 1984, the landing zone started down on 11th and G, had been a shooting gallery for heroin addicts. We took it over and turned it into the first program for getting clean and sober for Vietnam veterans. In 1986, Dust Off. John Atchison's here, he knows Dust Off. That addressed the homeless issue. So we dealt with jobs, recovery, and housing, so to speak. Together, the Dust Off program and the landing zone coalesced at 4141 Pacific Coast Highway into what is now the Veterans Village of San Diego, and it's a magical place. It's done a huge amount of good for people that are, I know, people throughout our gathering here today. Bill was with us every step of the way. Every stand down for sure, the big stuff, but more importantly, the little stuff, the little one-on-one meetings. There's people here I know, they called me yesterday to get directions and so forth, that would say to me, you know, Bill Mahedy was my friend. You know, that's how he touched us. And as a result, you know, the organization understood the debt that they owed to this man, and we named our first transitional housing, which is over on 24th Street in Golden Hills. It's named appropriately the Mahedy House. And so God bless Carol and the kids, and thank you guys so much for sharing your dad with us, you know. And Carol, you know, I've been lucky to sit with different masters and study, and everybody, all the mystics talk about the relationship between a man and a woman, a husband and wife. And what they would say to me in their little broken English or whatever was, no two, only one. And for certain, I would Bill and Carol. Thank you. In the late 1980s, Bill was invited by Shad to go to the Soviet Union to see if what worked here Mike worked with over there to help their guys from their long war in Afghanistan, which in the late 80s was just starting to slow down. Billy came to my office right after he got right off the airplane when he came back, and he said, "You must go on this next trip." So, of course, I went. It was a life-changing experience for me, but more importantly, the point to share here is that Bill understood that combat stress is a human event. It transcends boundaries. It transcends language and culture. We couldn't speak Russian. Those kids didn't speak English. And somehow we were one in that. And Billy understood that. He worked seamlessly with World War II veterans. Some are here today. With Korean War veterans. I guess in LA he even worked with Spanish-American War veterans. And for sure he worked so easily and well with us as Vietnam veterans. And I got to watch him work magic with the OIF, OEF, the new kids coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. In the final group he led at the VA, he challenged the vets once again to take action and do something positive. Bill Ryder and Michael Sloan are here, and they stood up a group called ACVAL, American Combat Veterans of War. This is a hands-on group. This is no namby-pamby thing. This is direct fire. This is the way Billy taught us. And they work with the kids coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan as they try to reintegrate into our society. They do a great job. In this year, this time frame, and even after his illness had cut back a little bit of his energy, Bill volunteered to go out to Oasis, which is an inpatient active duty combat stress unit, a terrific program out at the sub-base that's been set up by the Naval Medical Center, which we call Balboa. And he led that spirituality group with kids, you know, he's 75 or 74 at the time, and these kids are 22. There's no space there, people. There's no space there. It's life reflecting life. Beautiful to watch that. And he did that spirituality program based on his little handbook, A Spiritual Recovery for Combat Veterans. What was and remains amazing to me is he did all of this, that litany of achievement, and at the same time wrote other books. He'd written Out of the Night, The Spiritual Journey of Vietnam Veterans, which on its own has helped countless vets. But beyond that, he wrote other books, worked at the campus ministries at San Diego State and UC San Diego, and then his beloved St. David's Parish, as well as other parishes throughout the community. This was a Renaissance man, plain and simple. Bill spoke to the oneness of it all in a way that we could feel. He was authentic and direct. This was a man who had said yes to life. His trust was total. He did whatever was needed. Nothing was off limits. He had a fire in his belly. Any of us could stand up here and tell stories. One time I went with him to deliver Thanksgiving dinner to some of our guys, hardcore kids holed up out in East County. You wouldn't want to get anywhere near that property. Billy walked right up to the door. It's Bill Mahedy. Here's your dinner. We had the feeling that no matter how dicey the situation was, as long as Uncle Bill was there, everything would work out, and it did. While he had an obvious educational foundation based upon years of rigorous study and contemplation, that never got in the way with Uncle Bill. His was a fierce grace, but grace it was. His Irish temper was smoothed over with a raucous laugh and a brilliant twinkle in his eye. He loved a good argument and was ferociously well armed. He appeared fearless to us, and that gave us confidence. We borrowed his faith and his confidence while ours was being nurtured. He loved us when we were just learning how to love ourselves. When Billy was with you, it was never an issue of him wanting anything from you. He had no personal agenda. It was all for you, and that was the magic. He simply allowed God to flow through him like a hollow bamboo. He was a warrior for peace. He was a warrior for justice and truth. Even in his last few months, he was engaged in trying to better his beloved VA. He fought like the Dickens. He fought like the Dickens for increased staffing of clinicians at the post-trauma stress clinic, PCT clinic in Mission Valley. He knew what worked. And what worked was that direct file, one-on-one relationship. But it's difficult to do. He fought for that. And even in his last days, when he was up on the ward, in the oncology ward at the VA hospital where he received terrific care, when he was on those wards, he still fought for the staffing levels of the nurses on that ward. He felt they were overtaxed, working 15, 16 hours a day. I'll tell you one thing for sure. The Inspector General of the VA knows who Bill Mahedy is. Most importantly, Billy was a warrior of the heart. The journey from the head to the heart is a mere 15 inches, but it's one we don't often take. Bill lived there. He loved people. God knows he loved the veterans. He would remind us, be still and know that I am God. What a gift to be in that space. It's here now. You feel it now. It is comforting for me to know that all I have to do to find Bill is to drop into that space, into that stillness, into that silence, into that openness. There he sits. He sits in my heart. We used to talk about how I felt that each of us is part gravity and part grace. It's much harder to nurture the grace, quite easy to tickle the darkness. The mantra that evolved from that discourse remains precious to me, and it is, feed the light, the darkness feeds itself. And so now he is gone. A source of great light and great nutrition for light has left. We all miss him beyond words. This is one of those kairos moments he used to talk about. It's beyond words. These reflections are simply fingers pointing at the moon. When I try to explain who Bill was to me, I simply say, he saved my life. He saved my life. If any of you out here feel like that, stand with me for a moment in testimony that his life well and fully lived. We, all of us, veterans or not, are ripples in the pond from that gemstone that God sent. And it's simply up to us to fearlessly do the work in front of us, to make our own ripples and to abide with him